Okay, everybody. Hello. We should be live on YouTube and ROKFIN and ODYSEE right now. Since things were a little bit behind on ROKFIN yesterday, I just want to make sure that we're going there. But let's introduce ourselves. Okay, Bill, would you like to start? You're a former TV newsie like me. Does that basically sum it up?
That's basically it. Plus, I'm also an Army brat of 12 years, so I know something about the military life.
Plus, you're also tittle of the tattle, right?
Yes.
So
Yes, Queen.
every Wednesday night, Bill and I do an exclusive ROKFIN video for subscribers, and we call it Tittle Tattle. We are now on episode 7. This is episode 7, but it's a special edition with Lieutenant Colonel Rip Rawlings, who was 23 years in the Marine Corps. And we're going to give you a second to introduce yourself and tell us all the things that we need to know about you for our topic tonight. But special edition because of everything that's happening in Afghanistan. But I just wanted to let everybody know that this stream will self-destruct a little bit in, and we will be continuing on ROKFIN. Not a new thing for people who are used to following my, I don't know, Bill, what would we call it? Maneuvers?
Standard operating procedures.
Strategic tactical maneuver.
Yeah. The standard operating procedures is that we don't give you everything on YouTube anymore. F that.
Sorry. Yeah, YouTube, it's not me, it's you. But anyway, so we're gonna continue on ROKFIN, but we are gonna do a couple things here on YouTube because I think this is an important topic. But just an FYI, most of my stuff on ROKFIN is free, but this video will be for subscribers. And again, it's Tittle Tattle, which is Bill and I, we do this weekly media analysis show on ROKFIN for exclusive for subscribers, this time on Wednesday night. So if you're interested in that, go subscribe over on ROKFIN. It's $9.99 a month, and you get access to all the creators. And I think it's worth it. Not the least of it, just Bill. You know, I would pay $9.99 to see Bill every month. So I do basically. I do. I'm going to be paying Bill at least $9.99, right, Bill? So anyway, okay. So
I'm your own streaming service.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's start, Rip. Why don't you go ahead and give us your background? Sorry for that long intro.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I'm worth at least the $9.99, just FYI.
I'm sure that the government would like to be giving you $9.99 a month. I hope they're doing better than that after all your service.
I'll take that. So my name is Rip Rawlings. I'm a Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel, retired, 23 years and 10 deployments. And so it's great to be able to talk about some of this. I'll say one kind of a visio, which is I don't like to talk about politics. I would talk about policy or kind of about how things happen on the ground. I think that's really why I'm on today, is to talk, kind of what media things that were most concerning for military folks and kind of what it looks like through a military lens. But 23 years, 10 deployments, and I was an infantry and light armored reconnaissance guy, and retired about 2 years ago to write books. So I've got a few of them behind me, but I write military fiction, which is a lot of fun.
And you're a New York Times best-selling author.
Oh, yep, that's true.
So people get what would be your recommendation for a book that people would want to read about? Again, it's fiction, but based on your experiences.
For just me, or you talking about just in general? Good books, because I got a lot of recommendations for good books. So for me, if you want to read kind of something that's Tom Clancy-esque, I wrote a book with a guy named Mark Graney. It's right back here behind me. It's called Red Metal. And it's got all the kind of classic action stuff that you read in a Tom Clancy action thriller. Political intrigue, bad Russians, bad Chinese, and a lot of good Americans. So and allies.
Sounds like a Tom Clancy now. Well, I should say all I hear now is Tom Clancy. It's funny because I'll see my husband out fixing the fence, but I hear this voice and I'm like, because he listens to it on audio, and I don't know who the guy is that reads the book, but it's like I feel like I'm married to that guy and my husband. So anyway, okay, let's get to our topic at hand. We're talking Afghanistan. The chaos continues there, and the first thing I wanted to ask you about that you and I discussed before the stream is just how far back the warnings date for exactly what we're watching. So, we're being told, we kind of thought shit was going to hit the fan, but we didn't think it was going to be this bad this fast. Is that true? Like, is it true that they didn't know it was going to be this bad this fast?
No, I think So the interesting thing, I think, from anyone in the military is that we study military history avidly. I mean, we eat it up because it's a literal playbook for what could happen. And so, you don't need to go past Vietnam to see lessons kind of in the recent future, in the recent history, rather, to say what could happen, what are some of the things that we're concerned about. So we study evacuations, of people. We have whole units whose duties and responsibility is to evacuate people. A unit that I was with, which is called FAST, Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team, has a duty in the Marine Corps to evacuate specifically embassies. And so not only do we study it, but we've made it into a science. And so part of our job is to inform Department of State and, ultimately all the way up the chain of command, what it is that we are worried about, what we're concerned with, and what we need in order to perform the job. So now we've studied it since, arguably since the days that we put people first in Afghanistan. We had withdrawal plans for smaller footprints then. And then obviously as they grew, it waxed and waned on what would we do, kind of the what ifs. We do war gamings. When I was in the Pentagon, we do war games all the time. The war games do everything from how many people are we intending to evacuate? What does it look like at the end? Closing the force or ending a conflict is scarier in some ways than starting a conflict. And we're seeing the results of that obviously play out right now, is that it can be just as bad for not necessarily only our services or our men and women that are in uniform, but for the country as a whole. So yeah, we evaluate it all, and we've had plans, and there have been plans that have been created over and over and over again. At what level are those plans? It just depends on who it is that is been directed to kind of put up the latest version of them. I think there's always disconnects on what's going to work and what's not. But that is just a part of fleshing out what's going to be the best practices in making a plan work. So retrograde is the name of an operation like this. This is obviously a very large one, a country scale version of it. But yeah, we have whole units, and we've got planning teams, guys who go to school like me to go learn how to do planning. I went to a specialty school inside the Marine Corps, and I got a master's degree in military planning. And the reason the service does that is to efficiently plan invasions, attacks, war plans, and obviously retrogrades like we're seeing right now.
Bill, do you have any initial questions before I ask another one?
Not yet. I've got a few that I want to formulate, but I don't think we're ready to drop the hammer yet. So
okay,
you go right ahead.
I'm ready for hammers. So
okay.
Oh well, okay. Well, okay. So Colonel Rainey, I have to ask, or Colonel Rawlings. I'm sorry, I'm getting my things mixed up here. If you obviously
I've been called a lot worse, Bill. Just so
my apologies.
Anything,
you deserve a much more amount of respect there. So I apologize for that.
As long as you start with
it's always Bill. Okay, you mentioned there's plans. There's plans for exfil. There's plans for invasion. There's training. There's education, and we're not just talking about combat tactics. We're talking, evasion, invasion.
Right.
Why was this botched so badly? In your opinion?
Yeah, so that's the question of the day, right? So how did we get where we are? So I'm going to give you a little bit of inside baseball on planning. I don't want to go too long, but then I'll give you some speculation, because having worked at the strategic in the Pentagon, you do see how things operate regardless of what you write in an order. What's written and what's intended is not obviously what always happens on the ground. And so you have to kind of come up with what's the interplay between the two. So in our schools and our trade houses, we're planning this kind of stuff constantly. So there have been retrograde orders in place for years. They're at different levels. So this is how we're going to retrograde all of the Department of State inside the country of Afghanistan. This is how we intend to take out all of our strike aircraft. As you can imagine, it's nested. Each one of the different plans, hinges on the others. There are linchpins in there. If this happens, this can't happen, et cetera. I mean, there are these cascading effects that every military person looks at, and you evaluate it, and then you test it by putting it through a war game, and you give it to your leaders and say, hey, boss, here's kind of what we came up with. Is this meeting what you expect? Change this, change that, and then it's briefed to higher level authorities. So, yeah, so that's kind of the technical aspect of it. The reality of it is that you have people whose job it is who are ordered to execute these plans. They're given the plan itself, and they're told, okay, you are in command of Unit X. here's how you play in the plan. There's always inefficiencies that occur at those levels. It's not that, humans are fallible. That's pretty clear. But also, your regular human foibles come into play. I mean, military guys and gals are just as susceptible as anybody else, which is I'm brand new in the job. I just stepped foot, took command. I'm a 3-star general, for instance, and all of a sudden now I'm being asked to execute a plan. Well, I need to know about it. I need someone to brief me on it. And if you catch us off guard, somebody who's brand new in the job and it just has never done it before, then those things can be overwhelming. And that can be points where things don't work. Other places, and again, I'm trying to stray very far away from politics on this, but you do have senior people that meddle with the plan. And I'm not talking all the way up to POTUS. It happens at every different level where you have somebody like me, a lieutenant colonel, who's been tasked with the duty of coming up with a plan for retrograde in Afghanistan. I didn't, by the way. So if any of your viewers like Rip planned a whole bunch of other stuff, but not that's accurate. But what happens is you have this tendency for people to look at it and say, okay, what can we do to change that to suit this unit's need? The Army, the Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, obviously looking out for their own service. And so they'll say, well, I don't want to have all of my strike aircraft in the region when the Air Force is already gone. So that needs to be a change. I see, D minus whatever date or T minus whatever day, I'd like to have my aircraft gone. So there are these cascading effects. In addition to that, we come forward with a plan that has usually a heavy, a medium, and a light. Anyone who's planned anything military will recognize that language. We do it from the strategic through the operational and the tactical. To give you an idea of what that means, and again, I don't want to get too technical with people, but strategic are decisions that are made by the combatant commanders, that are made by the president, vice president, all of his service secretaries. That's the strategic realm. Nations interacting with each other. The operational realm for the military, and this is pertinent to Alice and our discussion later on about the media, but the operational realm is kind of where you have the mid-level commanders, 2- and 3-star generals that are executing brigade, division level items kind of on the ground. They're, if you will, the first of those organizations that are large enough to actually operate independently from the strategic command. And then you have tactical levels. That's from, Allison's husband in Force Recon to me as a battalion commander, all the way up to, in the case of Afghanistan, the Intermediate Joint Command, IJC. And the tendency that we see at these levels is that when you brief a plan at a heavy, a medium, a light, you say, sir, if you give me everything I need to conduct the operation, your best military planner is saying I need X, Y, and Z times 2. And I've coded that as the heavy option. If you do that, that's a lot of stuff, but I can really get the job done. Now, typically what happens is political leadership gets involved, military leadership gets involved, and they say, that's too many boots on the ground. It sends a bad signal. It's got a political issue to it. And by the way, I'm worried about feeding all those people. The cost to it is very exorbitant. So let's slim it down. So there's a discussion. Well, what about the medium option? All right, sir, if you want me to, I can still do the job with this level of troops and jets and, transportation aircraft, but it's going to be hard. It's harder. You're making it harder on me. Mm-hmm. And then you have the light option. Now, to be completely frank, every military planner that's worth their grade has a light option that's padded with still a lot of shit. Excuse my expression, a lot of stuff that says, look, here's the deal. If you really force me to, I can get away with executing a plan for an exfiltration, an evacuation, whatever, an embassy evacuation, whatever it is, from the small scale to the large scale like Afghanistan. Here's the bare bones. Now, we're still going to add some stuff in there, but typically what happens is people latch on to that smallest one, and then they start tinkering with it. We call it the 3,000-mile screwdriver. You have guys back in all over the place from CENTCOM to DC to wherever, and they're making decisions. Usually it's based on things that they've read or seen or other experts or officials that they've talked to. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily wrong, but based on our best military planning, it's maybe not the best plan. It's not the most efficient. It's the hardest on the troops. Usually things are tempered in the terms of what's the riskiest in terms of mission, what's the riskiest in terms of force. How many guys am I going to lose if I do this light plan versus how many guys and gals, obviously, am I going to lose if I do the heavy plan? And so to the military planners, we're trying to play with those ratios and come back to political and military leadership and say, okay, boss, we tinkered with the light plan, and here's what we came up with. Now, if you'll give me another second here, I'll tell you what happens then is that plan is given down to the people who are going to execute it. And then they have an opportunity to kind of decide, hey, I can or I can't do it. But then you have these layers of tinkering that continue to occur. And the longer that plan is on the shelf, so to speak, waiting to be, it's kind of a break glass in case of emergency kind of thing. The longer it's up there, the longer it erodes and its realities become less real or less efficient. Examples might be, the UK changes their part of the plan midstream. Well, that's a big deal for us. We were counting on them to provide 3 transportation aircraft. Now their government says they can only provide 2. Well, that's a big deal. We were counting on them to provide lift of 200, personnel per day. Now we're down to 160 or 120, whatever the number is. So you can see how the plans degrade very quickly, and typically they choose the plans that are politically the least investment, for political reasons. And so, so that's where we're at. I mean, if you want to know how did it fail, why did the plans not go the way we wanted them to, there's a myriad of reasons. It would be, we could take 2.5 hours talking about them, but generically what I just explained is why they get tinkered with, and the lightest, shortest plan is the one that's chosen. So you use the hammer. Did I hammer?
No, you hit the nail right on the head.
You nailed him.
But, I want to respond real quick with a couple of things before Allison goes back. One, a master sergeant in my dad's former unit, he used to have this saying that the best battle plans, they don't last past the first 10 seconds of engagement. Okay. So I get it. Shit happens. I understand that. But I also have this mindset of, if they knew they were going to do the pullout, which we all knew this was going to happen, why didn't somebody somewhere along the chain say, okay, let's start sneaking people out on a few flights out of this airport first and then announce the official pullout? That's
a great question. Yeah.
That's part of what I don't understand. Thank you, Allison.
And just to go to, this is from CNN. First, Biden's intelligence reports had no consensus on the timing of Taliban takeover. I was going to throw that out there. But as to Bill's point, you're seeing this, like Senators Klobuchar and Romney send Biden administration letter on evacuating journalists from Afghanistan. Why do we need that? Why are we having senators? Why do we need senators to say we need to get these people out? Are
Klobuchar, are either one of them on the Armed Forces Committee?
I don't know. I'll have to look them up.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good
question.
I'll
look them up.
Okay.
But
if
it just
not,
seems weird.
Why
do you need that letter? That's so stupid. It just seems so stupid to me. Like, if I'm at the point where my senator needs to be like, hey, could you get Allison out of there? I'm thinking that, it feels like we've already failed somewhere along the line. We've already failed. And to go to also rip one of your points, I learned this a couple weeks ago. We went to Glacier National Park. We were hiking, and they started this new ticket system. So just FYI to everybody that goes to a national park, you should definitely check ahead and make sure that you get a ticket, because now there's a limit for how many people can go in. And we didn't get a ticket because I checked and I didn't see it. And so of course my husband's like going full, I survived 2 wars and I want to see my national park on the Ranger.
Get him, Lynn! Get him!
And she goes, he goes, well, where's your manager? Because she goes, I can't do anything. And he's like, where's your boss? And she goes, I don't have a boss. And he goes, are you trying to tell me you are the single point of failure in this entire operation? Like, I don't think she even knows what that means. Like, what is a single point of failure? But it just, just goes to show, like, he's like, I worked for the government for 20 years. There's no way you're the single point of failure in this whole thing. And just to that point, though, it's like, the government is so, the amount of bureaucracy and people and steps and process that you have to go through to do anything for the government. It just seems like there's no way that anyone is just like, we didn't think about the journalists, or we didn't have conversations about this or that. Maybe I don't know everything, but it just seems weird,
the fact that Amy Klobuchar would have any kind of input when it comes to military strategy, tactics, or anything to do with the United States military will keep me up tonight.
Or that she's the one that has to write the letter to get you out. I mean, come on. And then, okay, so then I just wanted to, like, I'll leave this up while we're talking, but yeah, this is the map that the New York Times is showing May 5th to August 14th. And, the dark yellow is Taliban in May and in August. And white is government controlled. And then the light yellow is contested.
If I can interject, the tricky part about maps like that is there were Taliban in pretty much every district. They've always been there. In a lot of cases, the Taliban, since it's an ideological, force, there are people that live in those districts that never really stop being Taliban. So it's a little disingenuous to say, I know what the graphic is intending to do, which is show levels of control. Although, I might even argue with some of that because I think levels of Taliban control in some of those regions, they've been there. Some of those regions are just wide open desert. So if there's 30 people in it and they're Taliban, then yeah, they control 300 kilometers north and 80 kilometers east and west. So some of that is a little bit disingenuous. The civilian population centers and big cities is what most people focus on, and that's certainly what the Afghan National Army and the Afghan government did before it collapsed, which was to say these civilian population centers are really what's important to me. If we have 300, 800 Taliban that are living in that hill or out in those desert regions, we kind of don't care about them because they're managed. And in fact, that arguably is the best way to kind of sum up the strategy we've had since 2015, which has been stalemate. And, we could talk endlessly about that as a strategy, but it worked. It was effective. And it is one of the things, to answer kind of Bill a little better, is that it is one of the things that led to us where we are now, is that we, with 5,000 some odd uniformed service members and about an equal number of contractors, we were able to basically keep the Taliban at bay since 2015 and out of the population centers. And of course, keep our partners trained and training, keep their forces efficient or relatively efficient. You can argue that their levels of corruption were very high, but all of a sudden we see images like what Allison put up from the New York Times, and it looks very overwhelming. Well, there's a lot of story to that also. You had a lot of Afghanistan army and police that when they see every strike fighter in their region leave the Kandahar airport, they know that there will be no more U.S. bombs supporting them. And they're now fighting tay-a-tay against the Taliban. And there's nothing else that's going to come over. And if you want to take it to the level of, well, what worked in Iraq, we continued to provide strike support. We had reactionary forces available. So, kind of more to what Bill was asking with his first question, the first hammer, I should say, was, what's available over the horizon? Well, the Iraqis were always able to count on the fact that there was a giant green machine, called the United States military forces that could come thump whatever they needed thumped. And we did it a lot. In fact, probably a lot more than people even recognize. The amount of ISIS that we crushed with Iraqi army calling for the close air support is classified, but it's a lot more than a lot of taxpayer dollars that you don't know you spent. And it certainly did the job. When those aircraft and others were directed to leave, our Afghan partners looked at it and said, I certainly can't do this on my own.
Before we nuke the YouTube stream and move over to ROKFIN and discuss media and media coverage of it all and what it's like being a journalist embedded, trying to understand what's going on and how the military and journalists work, either not together or together or whatever. We're going to talk all about that because I know you had journalists embedded with you. I'm curious, with this specifically, well, actually, let me ask you Corn Pop's question here before I get to mine, before I forget. Are the military and civilian, what'd you say?
Oh, I said it's a good question.
Okay. Are the military and civilians safe at the airport? They seem to be a bullseye surrounded by the Taliban. And I did see today that I think it was the State Department basically announced to Americans that they cannot guarantee a safe convoy to the airport. So, and basically it's a first come, first serve. So you can't even necessarily get out. It just seems like a total shit show.
Yeah, that's what happens when you leave a power vacuum. So yes, there's really no way to sugarcoat a shit show. I mean, if you're, so the Department of State is saying that they can't guarantee your safety to the airport because everything outside the cordon of the airport, the Kabul International Airport, which is a very large airport. I mean, it's not as big as Dulles, for instance, but it has it's got a very large footprint. So guarding it, there's a civilian side and a military side. I've been all over that airport myself. And the guys that are guarding it, are having to guard not just from Taliban intrusion and the possibility that the Taliban would infiltrate and blow up, because we're still at war effectively with them, that they would blow up one of our aircraft on the ground, refueling, rearming, whatever the case is. But just as equally that, 300 civilians will find the one spot that they're not guarding. And when you have the light option, kind of the same thing that I said before, and you have and we're seeing this right now, where there have been U.S. troops ordered back into the area, then yes, that was a tremendous failure, because just having enough boots on the ground, so to speak, to guard the airport is a requirement for an evacuation. The Department of State does own a lot of this. I'm not going to cast blame on them. And my experience with the Department of State is not as expansive maybe as with the military. With FAST, we fell under the Department of State every time we would prepare for and execute an embassy evacuation. It's very similar in these circumstances, but the Department of State is technically required to know who is in the country, what are they doing, and how to get them out if they need to evacuate them at any time. So they're kind of responsible for the numbers, and we, the military, are responsible for ensuring their safety to and from airports, on the airfield itself, all the way up until they get back to friendly soil, whether that be the United States or another nation that's asked us to evacuate our citizens. So yeah, it is a shit show. It's very frightening to watch, in the sense that I can give you some speculation, which is I think the Taliban love every aspect of this. So I don't want to play too far into their hands, but I will say I don't think that they're going to do anything besides guarantee some of our citizens, ability to get to the airport, because it's embarrassing to us to have a Taliban escort a U.S. citizen and his family and say, "Here's your guy. You want him? We took him here. And by the way, he's doing great." Now, that's not to say there aren't quite a few that fit in the gray area. I mean, it's heartbreaking for me, and this kind of plays directly into the media that I know Allison's going to take us to in a minute, but there are some photos that are playing out right now that very much are influencing kind of strategic decision-making, that show, these Afghan citizens, both men and women, with little certificates that say, "Thanks for helping us build the bridge, signed, U.S. Army unit," whatever. And to them, it's a green card. Hey, I worked for you, and now I need transport, because it's a death note to the Taliban. When they see that certificate, they're going to kill them. When we see it, unfortunately, it's a certificate of appreciation saying thanks for helping nation build your country, and it's not going to get them on an airplane. So, I have my opinions on who should come, but be honest with you, that's the group that I worry about the most. Will American citizens get out? I'm not the burning bush. I don't want to punch it by my weight, but I will say that I would say, barring some very unforeseen circumstances, which arguably is the whole shit show we're seeing now, the vast majority will get out safely, probably within the next 2 weeks.
Okay, last question before we go over to ROKFIN, and just another announcement for everybody. ROKFIN, this is going to be an exclusive for subscribers over there. We do it once a week. Bill and I do media analysis. This is a special edition because of Afghanistan. So head over there. Stephen brings up the point of, he says, did Biden deliberately undermine the Ghani regime by depriving them of contractors to service their helicopters? Could this have been a double cross by Biden? He wanted the Taliban to win. That may be a little bit, a little bit deeper than I would go, but I do have a question on that vein, which is, I saw President Ghani mention today that they were let down by their international partners. When Biden spoke, I think, was it yesterday? I don't know, day before. Days are all blurry right now. He basically blamed Afghanistan. His statement was like, essentially, they don't want to fight for themselves, so we're out of here. And they showed us that this would have happened 5 years in the future or 1 year in the past. They just didn't want to fight. It seemed odd that, I don't know, we would go into a country tussle things up, and then we would blame them for what's going on. What do I know? It just seems weird. It seemed weird to me it seemed like, I don't know, victim blaming in some kind of, weird way. So I'm curious, what's the subtext we're missing here between President Biden and President Ghani? Do you think, they're not friends anymore? Because I'm sure that Ghani doesn't want to just be like, Biden totally left us out to dry. Thanks a lot. But he did make a statement that he felt like they were let down by their international partners.
I'm not going to comment directly on politics. I mean, all presidents make decisions. To be magnanimous, I'll say this: we've had an equal number of Democrats and Republicans in office, and all of them have had a hand in what's happening. So let me say this. Let me see if I can kind of clarify, because I know where the question is going on some of that. Then I think this is the part that probably frustrates a lot of military men and women. I pulled down the statistics just because this is one of the most common questions I've been asked so far. So we all know that we've lost, 2,500 U.S. military. We've lost about double that, about 4,000 contractors. So you have a tremendous amount of men and women, not all Americans, but who have died as a result of the conflict. The Afghan National Army and the Afghan National Police, ANA and ANP combined, have lost 66,000. To put that into perspective, 66,000 lost over the war. That's about a quarter of their force to a third of their standing army that's been lost.
Damn.
So if you tell a young Afghan, if you tell a young Marine or soldier, and the statistics don't play out perfectly like this, but if you tell me that if I serve a 20-year term, or, let's say a 10-year term, and my chances of survival are 66%, a third of you are not coming home, you lose a lot of people, because they are going to go as far as they're asked to go. But my own personal experience was there are a lot of very good Afghan National Army and very good Afghan National Police. Excellent. They had their nation at heart. They really believed that democracy was a good thing. Their version of it. Let's not, play fast and loose with the rules. They have a version of democracy that's not ours. It's very corrupt, but frankly, it's a system that works. And they are
Isn't our democracy pretty corrupt? I don't know. I know you don't want to talk politics, but
no. The greatest question ever asked when at the last election when I was in Afghanistan, I asked one of my young interpreters. He was about 18 years old, but as with all 18-year-olds, the world round was as wise as the day is long. He had just kind of been, and of course he'd been through a lot. But I said, "Are you going to vote?" And he said, "Yes, sir, I'm going to vote." And I said, "Are you confident in the system?" He said, "Yeah, I'm pretty confident that it'll be a relatively fair election." I said, "But aren't you worried about the corruption?" And what I was aiming at is the two lead candidates looked fairly corrupt to me. What did he think? And his response was very pithy for an 18-year-old, from the middle of Kandahar. It was, "Do you need to look much further than DC to find corruption?" That was his question. Yeah. And I'm like, holy,
let's get that guy over here. We need him.
I was like, he spoke like a lot of my Marines do, which is they have no problem speaking the truth. Whereas as we get older, we tend to kind of mince words, not necessarily speak the truth. So what I'll say is, I think, that level of investment, losing a third of your army and police, with those factors in mind, when, as I said earlier, when there's no strike aircraft behind me, no U.S. Marines that are going to come out and support me when I need it, no highly well-trained force ready to come to support when I need it, then we're going to have guys melting in the woodwork. I'll say also, there are guys that they're fantastic leaders at the lower level, sergeants, corporals, colonels, who it's so dangerous. It was so dangerous for them that they sought desk jobs, and it's tough for me to look down my nose at it. It was, hey, I've done this for 15 years. I'm an Afghan Army guy, for instance, and I've made it to the rank of staff sergeant. I want to take my family to Kabul and organize logistics for a little while. So yeah, they needed a break. They were fighting constant war. We've been rotating guys back from Afghanistan. They go over for 6-month rotations, some up to a year. So it's very hard for me to be critical of their performance when they knew that there was nothing that was going to be there to support them. When we were there since 2015 with about 5,000 U.S. troops on the ground, we've kept the Taliban at bay because the Taliban knew that we were going to come in and kick their butt if they messed with our friends, the Afghan National Army and Afghan National Police. I will say also for the military guys, this is heartrending because most of us, the great majority of us, made very good friends, kept in touch with some of them. And, in some I have interpreters that are completely off the net as of weeks ago. And, we can all presume what's happened. We're seeing it play out in front of us. It's happening in the news every single minute. All you have to do is watch. But for military guys, this has a special flavor of shock and difficulty because it's just very personal to us.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about that after we make the move over to ROKFIN, including the media's coverage of this crisis going on in Afghanistan.
Before we piece out of here, somebody did ask about supporting veterans. Is there anything you recommend? Like, is there an organization that you point people towards?
There are a lot. Yeah. I'm not looking at, so you guys are seeing all the questions. Mine says private chat only. So I'm seeing Bill's questions, but no.
Oh, you have to go onto YouTube.
I know. I feel really bad now because I'm realizing that people are probably asking questions and maybe there's something in there that was really cool that I didn't see. But
if you have to kind of simultaneous have the YouTube video up and watch the YouTube comments.
That's why when you see me looking over here, I'm watching the YouTube comments.
You have to simultaneous have the YouTube video up and watch the YouTube comments. I know that voice.
When you see me, Allison, what are you doing?
All right, but yeah, but we'll go through all that. But before let's head over to ROKFIN. But real fast for the people watching on YouTube, what can people do if they're interested in supporting veterans? I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I'll kind of nug it down to the simple stuff, but the first one is just the most immediate. I mean, in the military, kind of universally from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps, what we like to say is self-aid, buddy aid, corpsman aid. And what it means is, take care of yourself first if you can. This is if you're wounded, obviously not egregiously. But then buddy aid, get a friend over who's got a medical kit, have them, help you out, put a bandage on you, whatever the case may be, and then call for somebody else if you can. So I'd give the same recommendation, which is if you have a neighbor, a relative, I'm surprised at how many of my Marines I get contacted by in a week or in a month that are having problems all over the map, different kinds of stuff. And their family hasn't done anything. So if you have a family member that is in the service and is having some trouble, go over and talk to them. You'd be surprised at how many of them don't want to talk because they just, with my relatives, I mean, I'm surprised at how many of them are really scared to ask me about questions about combat. And the first thing that they always ask me it's usually boneheaded, dumb stuff. My younger cousins always want to know what it's like to, shoot at people and be shot at. I won't get graphic here, but, then older relatives just assume that, you're dying with PTSD every day and they've got all their own assumptions. So the first thing I would say is self-aid, which is go talk to your military brothers and sisters. They're probably all in your family and just have a chat with them and say, hey man, how you dealing with this Afghanistan stuff? It's probably hitting you pretty hard. Let's go get a brew or the British version of a brew, which is coffee. By the way, I want to show off my mug real quick. Can you read that? More coffee, less communist. Right. Just to show it.
Don't say that. Some people on YouTube will get triggered. How dare you talk about communists?
I got no problem with that. But the second thing I would say is there are a series of kind of state groups and organizations that do stuff that are veteran outreach, and every state's a little bit different. The state of Virginia has quite a few. They actually invested very heavily in veterans around, I think it was about 2011. So they started to put in some programs that include everything from mental health to, hey, I need someone to give me a ride. I'm a veteran that has, disabilities, whatever the case is. Then there's a bunch. I see my wife came online, so she's on there, and she says the Semper Fi Fund is a good way to go. There's a lot of funds like that. My favorite is the USO. The USO has been doing stuff for service members for a long time. And the International Red Cross, both, they have everything from a place in an airport where a kid going to visit his mom while he's on leave can stop in and get a cup of coffee. I mean, almost every big airport in the country has a USO, and a few in other countries like Germany or places we have bases. But yeah, so first thing is go talk to your relatives. Second is, take a look close and look at your state, see if you can go volunteer down at one of the places that, gives rides to vets. Virginia has a Homes for Veterans program. I mean, that's above and beyond support for Afghanistan, obviously. And then, there's stuff like, the USO and Semper Fi and quite a few those are national level organizations and they do a tremendous amount of good. There are a few others I'll mention just because I've had an inordinate amount of young men. I only committed men, so I apologize if anyone's, kind of going to jump on me and say, well, what about women? It's for everybody. But I've had an inordinate amount of my men who have come back and had problems. About 15% have had what I would call PTSD. It's not always diagnosed that way. Sometimes they just need help, on the short duration because they're feeling pretty crummy about something. But it's manifesting itself in a way that civilians don't appreciate. They get road rage or whatever it is. But so there's a lot of places that are retreats for soldiers, sailors, and Marines, so they can kind of get over the things that they've been worrying about. And those are usually local or regional as well. So I don't know, long-winded answer, but there is a lot of need, service, especially now. I don't know if everybody heard it. I tried to silence it quickly, but I'm getting about 15 to 30 texts an hour from, former Marines, comrades in arms, former soldiers, sailors, and airmen that I served with, officers that are still working with people that are downrange or are downrange. And so, yeah, everybody's kind of involved. I would say if we were to turn back the clock to Vietnam, when we saw the evacuations happening there, what would we wish to do? It would be, if there's nothing you can do and you're a civilian, support your service members as they try to figure out how to fix this, because they're going to be the ones that are going to unravel this mess to the best of its ability. It's not going to be pretty, but they're the ones that are in harm's way trying to get as many people out as they can right now.
One other place you can always check, especially in more rural areas, is you can always start with your local VFW. I actually volunteer at my father's VFW, and we always have offered help and have actually had to assist soldiers with certain issues, whether it be PTSD or just needing somebody to talk. So if you're in a more rural area, that's a great place you can start as well.
Right on. I'm finally in the chat, and someone said, no yoga, more Bible. I mean, anything that helps. You need to kind of temper it for the service.
Oh, it's because somebody else said hot yoga is good for
veterans. I know. I saw that too.
I'm a huge fan of hot yoga. So
yeah. Well, I mean,
that comes my husband.
That comes down to exercise. But yeah, I mean, even just jogging with a buddy. I mean, I'm kind of taking metaphorically what they put on there. But there's spiritual need. Guys and gals are of all religions. Our service members are everybody.
Well, one of the great, I mean, not trying to promote yoga or anything, but I do think breathing is central to living, first off, but it also regulates your heart rate and your cortisol levels and all that stuff. So I started doing yoga a long time ago as, a mental health practice, really, because, I wasn't finding like talking about things to be as helpful as learning how to respond to my body, and so anyway, that's my, if I had an addition, I would say, I do think like breathing, yoga, that physical stuff does help, anyway, what do I know anyway? So, but last thing, but what do I say to my Marine congressman? Was the question, is there, because I'll say you're living in a place where you want to write to a policymaker. Who knows if they listen, but let's just say that maybe they do for a second. Is there anything people should ask their policymakers in regards to what's happening, I guess, specifically right now, or generally speaking, on veterans issues?
So that's a tricky one. I mean, obviously right now, pretty much every Congress member is focused on making sure that anybody in their district is getting out of Afghanistan. Almost all 50 states, there are people that are still trapped in Afghanistan. So, you're not going to get a response from anybody anytime soon on veteran issues, because they're focused on, evacuation issues and that kind of thing. If you wanted to write to your congressman, I mean, every state is different. I will say there are some states, I'm not going to name them. I do know them because I have Marines that live in those states, and former soldiers and sailors that worked with me or for me, and say that their state systems are crummy. Nationally, the VA has had a lot of trouble. And I think, fortunately for most service members, it's starting to get very good, a lot better than they used to be. They used to kind of have a lot of misdiagnosis problems. There were a lot of patient care problems, and I'm talking about all the way back to World War II veterans are still being cared for, and are having a lot of difficulty. I've had some of that in my own family. My wife's dad was a waist gunner on a B-17 in World War II, and he's since passed away, but he had a VA doctor try to clean his ears, and he blew out his eardrum. I mean, literally, took it out so that it was no longer functional. So the VA, I think what you can do when it comes to that is, by all means, write to your congressman and tell them that you want to have a strong VA. It costs the government a lot of money, but it's the aftercare for the service members that is extremely important. Everything from my Marines who've lost limbs over there, they get a free limb. I'm glad to pay the taxes for that. To me, that's a good thing to put money towards, is that we sent one of our guys downrange and they lost a leg. Let's buy him a new leg. Okay. So some of that stuff you can just reinforce by contacting your congressman and say, hey, look, let's clean up the VA the best we can in my state. Let's make sure that there's access in my state, those kinds of things. So that would be where I would start, to be honest, is that write nationally to support locally.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody, we're heading over to ROKFIN again. This is Tittle Tattle episode 7, the weekly media analysis show that Bill Doris, XTV Newsy, that you see on the bottom there, and I do every week for subscribers on ROKFIN. And we have Lieutenant Colonel Rip Rawlings with us as a guest for this special edition of it. But if you're interested in seeing more of this kind of stuff on Wednesday nights, got to head over to ROKFIN. And